Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. Our next guest first made waves with his film about the LA riots, movie whose title I don't think I can say. Now Justin Chon is back with his third film, Miss Purple, the story of a Koreatown karaoke hostess who reconnects with her brother as she takes care of her dying father. Let's take a look.
Juanita! Please don't leave. You can't do this to me,
You'll figure it out.
You have one unheard message.
Hey, Carey. So, I'm kind of in a bind right now, and Dad's live-in nurse just quit. I was just wondering if, there was any possibility that you could come over and watch him.
우리 이쁜딸 나한테 너밖에 없다. Kasie, he's terminal.
I'm not gonna put him in a hospice.
Let go!
Ever curious about what I do for work?
Kasie, whatever you had to do to keep Dad alive, I don't judge you for it, okay?
That's not the way to hurt me. That's not the way to hurt me.
How'd you get him outside?
Bed has wheels, you know?
Everybody, please welcome Justin Chon. Let's hear it. Justin, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
Your last film, I think, had fairly personal resonance for you. I imagine all films for all filmmakers really do. I'm wondering what your personal connection is to this story, the story of a woman who works as a hostess in a karaoke bar in Koreatown and is taking care of her dying father while trying to reconnect with her sort of estranged brother.
Yeah. So luckily I have both of my parents still. They're alive and well. But I have a younger sister, and she's 3 years younger than I am. And growing up, we've had a pretty tough relationship. But, once we started families and life has gotten more complicated, we've become much closer. And, I really wanted to examine that relationship. I think it's different from brothers and from sisters because of the whole gender thing. I think the communication tends to be a little bit more difficult, a little bit more blocked. So, and I also wanted to set it in a gentrifying Koreatown, Los Angeles, which now, is a great place to hang out. When I was growing up in the 80s, it was not. And sometimes I have a lot of friends who grew up there, and sometimes I feel like the world kept turning and progressing, and some of these families and people just kind of stood still. So it's also about sort of the failed American dream. Sometimes it doesn't work out the way you think, and in my past film, Gook, I kind of also explore that as well. It's like, sometimes things don't turn out the way we plan, is all.
Yeah, at the risk of generalizing, it's a story, the failed American dream is a story that's rarely explored, I think, within the Asian community.
Yeah, we're in more mainstream media, we're portrayed as
success stories.
Yeah, like we become doctors and lawyers and successful businessmen, and we don't really explore the people who are just working class, you know, and that's a lot of a majority of us, you know.
Yeah, it's insane
Yeah.
that is the case. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that can be said for most communities within American movies, with the exception of the African American community, right? And what that is, a whole other issue when it comes to representation. And
Absolutely.
why it's that it's only people low on the socioeconomic stratus within the African American community that are portrayed that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you decide to set out to explore a middle class community, a lower middle class community, what is your first thought? What are your first thoughts about representation and getting it right and being authentic?
So this particular story didn't require as much research in terms of their socioeconomic status because, I mean, these are people I grew up with. But in terms of like the karaoke aspect, that's unfortunately something that's pretty prevalent. It's a way of doing also in Asia. A lot of people go to those type of places to do business and all that. But, you know, my considerations were, you know, I think there's a lot of other films that are, you know, really great for the community. But I think they're not really representative of the other 99%, you know, and this film, you know, like there are certain directors that really go into subcultures or lesser known stories, and that's what I hope to do with my films. But the other thing that I really try to do is weave different cultures into the film. So this one had a particular, you know, had a whole Chicano storyline that weaved through the film. And it was a way for her to get out of her bubble, and it also affected the score because there's a whole kind of Spanish-inspired score in this film. And that's really important to me because, you know, within these communities, it's not just whatever segmented ethnicity that the story is about. It should be inclusive.
Right, and in some ways, only allowing that one community's culture to sort of permeate the story can feel disrepresentative of what their actual lives would be like.
It's not truthful, you know. It's not authentic. I mean,
You could be a Korean woman living in Koreatown and also have your life scored by Chicano music.
absolutely. And the thing that people don't know about Koreatown and Los Angeles is there's more Hispanic people there than Korean people. They were there first, and they just sheer numbers wise, it's there's tons of Chicanos, you know, and nobody wants to talk about that or nobody points that out. But you know, in general, like California is, you know, it's basically a lot of Hispanics, you know, and you could get by only speaking Spanish.
One thing that I felt from the film was that you enjoy capturing what feels real, the most real, and I think to the point where there's a scene where the brother is pushing his sort of dying father in his bed down the street to try to get him outside, and the bed breaks a little bit, and we're clearly shooting this on a long lens, and I had the impression that you might have just sent your two actors down the street without any extras around or anything like that.
Yeah, we did.
How did it go?
So we practiced putting the bed on and off a van. We just couldn't afford the permits because to actually do that shot properly, you would have to close down the street, get cops, fill it with extras. You know, it's a very expensive shot. So we took the van off. The actors got on. They were pushing the dad down the street in the bed, and the bed fell apart, and that was an accident.
I loved it.
Yeah. But luckily, the two of them were professionals, and he stayed in the bed. He kind of like rolled a little bit, almost like fell off the bed, but he stayed in character, and he put the bed back together and pushed him the rest of the way.
It fits in with other sequences in the movie, though, as well. For instance, when she's looking for a new nurse to take care of her father, there is this sense, and I'm assuming that those were actors, but it does feel in some ways like you sent her into a parking lot, and
Oh, yeah.
just had her interacting with strangers.
Yeah, and that's you're correct in that those were actual scenes.
Yeah.
It was set up, but yeah, you're right. I did want it to have that sort of frenetic feeling of what she must be feeling emotionally. Trying to get a new nurse, and I also wanted to feel rough. And then there's certain scenes that are much more sort of polished, and like for example, the scene in the middle of the film where they have dinner, and it's much more standard coverage, and much more polished. But yeah, I love mixing sort of that sort of docu style with more refined ways of shooting. It just adds to the realism of the film.
Which you kind of have to do when we approach the climax of the film without giving it away.
Yeah.
And you have to go for a sort of raw authenticity, but at the same time, the actual physicality of the scene demands a lot of planning so that nobody gets hurt.
Exactly. So when you watch it, it's the scene inside of a karaoke, and it gets pretty crazy and violent. But in order for people to believe that is, for it to be effective, it needs to feel real. But like you're saying, we accomplished that by giving the audience an expectation of realism. But that particular scene was very, very much planned out because there's a lot of action in it. So you're correct. But I love that. I love the realism. It's the reason I cast, all unknown actors for this film.
How did you find them?
So Tiffany Chu, who plays the main actress, Kasie, I was I was really looking for a fresh face, and sometimes I'm in these casting offices and they talk about how there weren't any really great Asian actors, so they had to cast outside. And my answer to that is, you guys just weren't looking hard enough. So I went out and I did a lot of street casting, and we posted up flyers around LA. And I must have looked like such a creep. I was going on Instagram and just sliding into people's DMs, being like, "Hey, you want to be in a movie?" And I'm sure they thought I was a creep. But
Have you ever thought about being an actress?
yeah, man, which is really weird. But we posted an ad on a Facebook group, and that's how we met Tiffany. She came in for an audition, and naturally she had this sort of presence and a melancholic nature to her that I really gravitated towards. So that's how we found her. And Teddy, who plays her brother, I have a friend named Andrew on. He directed a film called Spa Night, and it's also set in Koreatown. I asked him, if you could have cast somebody but wasn't right for the film, who would that have been? And he sent me about 5 audition tapes, and Teddy was one of them. And then the father I found at a local Korean theater group. So that's how I cast him. But I really love that type of casting because it helps the audience kind of fall into the story and not be distracted, being like, oh, there's Tom Cruise, or, there's, like, you really start to believe that this is their real lives. Yeah.
Now, let's talk about color, because the colors in this movie are explosive, which is a complete, obviously, like 180 from the last film. Yeah. So when did you decide that was going to be the case? And 2, how did you maintain a sort of naturalistic movie while at the same time exploring color this way? Because at no point does it feel melodramatic, or does it feel like you're doing something that's surreal or hallucinogenic, but it does feel very colorful.
Yeah. So my last film was black and white, and that's kind of the question I've gotten is your next film going to be in color? And I'm like, hell yeah, it's going to be in color. But the
most color.
Yeah. So to kind of answer that question first is that the color comes from naturally motivated sources. So if it's blue hour. The sun has just gone down. If it's sunset, that's where the sunlight comes in. But in terms of the planned color, so it's called Miss Purple, and the color purple in the Korean culture is a color for mourning someone's death. So this film is kind of a death procession. The complementary color to purple is green, which is the color of money. And so if you look at the color palette, it's a lot of purple and greens. Now there's colors in between that, but those are the foundational colors. And then when you look inside the karaoke, there's variations. You know, there's some reds and all that stuff. But
I think one of your primary settings is a karaoke bar immediately gives you the
yeah.
ability to splash color all
Yeah,
around.
exactly, and that's naturally motivated from the club. But if you look at like there's a pool hall, there's somewhere they go on a little outing to a coffee shop. There's a PC room, and then there's a place where she gets her dress. That's all in one location, and that building is like a light purple, and the railings are green. So that's where we kind of brought the look together and made it more cohesive by finding locations like that.
Did that location have all of those things within it, or did you build them out in one location?
No, they were all in that little 2-story strip mall. So
wow.
yeah, so that's why we picked that location to kind of have like a hub, a center for the film.
How did you get it? This is so in the weeds on making a movie, but those are several different businesses with different owners. How did you get them all to agree so that it could be this? I mean, I guess that's on your location manager who did it. You may.
I'm the location manager.
Are you really?
Yeah, we just went and talked to him and got one by one on board. Now the person who owns the building was not cooperative. So
Really?
yeah, there's nothing I could do to convince him. We offered him tons of money, like nothing. He would not. He just does. He's like, I don't think you guys understand. I don't let big films shoot here. You're certainly not going to shoot here. So I just waited till the valet people left at 2 a.m. So anything in the parking lot, we shot after hours. Yeah.
One of the things about the film, I brought this up in the green room, and it seems like you knew you were going to have to be talking about this since you made the choice to do it, which is the slowed down frame rate style of, or is it a high frame rate? Is it
A low frame rate.
Low frame rate. That's very reminiscent of Wong Kar-wai, especially because that was pioneered with Asian actors, I think, as well. So it's hard not to immediately think of like Chungking Express or Fallen Angels.
Yeah.
Can you talk about making that decision? Because I imagine it's not an easy decision to make.
Yeah.
Considering it's so iconic.
Exactly. It's
So a small group of people.
Yeah, exactly. So the effect happens when she's in emotional distress in this film, rather than for romance or it's a lot of movement is happening when we use it. But the filmmaker that really influenced this film was Hirokazu Koreeda. So there's a film called Nobody Knows, and the color palette for that was purple and green. So it's mostly green, and then on the subway home at the end, it's like purple, and it's and without giving the ending away of Nobody Knows, but even towards the end, it's like a lot of purple. So it's funny that we keep getting compared to Wong Kar-wai because of the low frame rate, but
I don't think the movie itself,
oh yeah,
as a whole,
Yeah.
has the comparison to Wong Kar-wai,
Yeah.
really. But it's just those two moments.
absolutely, and
It's too iconic to not.
it's too iconic, and it's also the fact that we're Asian American, and it just the visuals take you back to that. I totally understand. I remember, in the beginning of the movie, she's sitting at the LA River and she's walking around, and we had talked about the low frame rate during prep, and then the DP was like, "Come over here," and he's like, "Check this out," and he put it in camera, and I was like, "Okay, I'm not gonna deny that's beautiful, but I'm gonna tell you right now, okay, if we go this direction, we're gonna have to talk about Wong Kar-wai for forever." Are you cool with that? Is that what you want to do? And he was like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, so you don't mind if your cinematography gets compared to his work in his specific films? And he's like, no, that'd be an honor if we got compared. And I said, okay, let's do it. Let's go for it. And
What was it about Koreeda that influenced you?
he
Color palette or the way the story structure?
Well, he tells his films, I think, are a little bit more patient than mine. But his films are about family.
Yeah.
And I tend to gravitate towards unconventional families.
Forgive me for forgetting this, but his last film was
Shoplifters.
Shoplifters, yeah. It's an unbelievably beautiful film.
Absolutely. And also about a unconventional family. And
All it's about. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. And I'm just in my films. I'm really trying to show how we're a lot more alike than different through these type of situations, and something that a lot of people can relate with is family and the complexities of them. But you know, I've always really connected to his work, and they've made me very introspective about my own life. This is a little bit, you know, a little bit more. I mean, it's very tonal, but you know, it's a little bit more bombastic than one of his films.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a classical approach to his movies, and like you said, I think a patience that is a little bit different than the way that you approach.
And mine is a little bit more like cowboy style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If
That makes any sense. Yeah.
I think we have time for a couple questions. Who has a question? Hi.
Hi. I was reading an article a few weeks ago about The Farewell and how the director had to face pressures about like adding a token white character into the movie. Did you feel like you faced that kind of pressure during the process of making your movie?
Not this movie. Not this movie. Not my last movie. It's the reason I find my own financing, so I don't have to adhere to those type of demands. I will say my last film, when I took it to market and I was trying to get financing for it, I did get pressured. They said, "Hey, why can't there be a white cop that comes in the middle of the riots and tells
Saves everybody.
Yeah, and tells everybody to leave?" And I'm like, "Because were you there during the riots? There was no white people in the hood." But you know, here's the thing: I want my films to be inclusive. So my next film, which is about a Korean American adoptee that's getting deported, he's in an interracial marriage, and there's plenty of white people in my film.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Oh.
I want it to be inclusive and diverse, but you know, as you saw in Gook, it's just as much an African American story, and in this film, there's a whole Chicano thread. But yeah, you know, it's tough because we need to make more films. So when it becomes more financially viable, I think that will slowly change to just tell the story that's meant to be told, rather than these kind of archaic financial models that don't even work anymore. But I'm hopeful. But I want to tell stories that are honest, not stunt casting. Yeah.
One more. Hey.
Hi.
Hey.
Has your creative process changed at all when you're writing your films? From like Man Up all the way to like your next one you're doing?
Yes and no. No, in the way that it always still comes from a visceral, intuitive place. So I tend to usually, my first draft is usually I think about the film for a very long time, and I kind of have like stakes in the ground. Okay, at this moment I want this to happen. At the midpoint I want something like this. I want the film to end like this, so I can write through it. And I do basically something called a vomit draft. I just write it within like 2-3 weeks.
How long do you usually find your vomit drafts are? Because for some people, they're like 200 pages. For some people, they're like 70.
Mine tends to run a bit shorter. Yeah, like about 80, 90. But what happens is when I have to start structuring and do the real work of making it into an actual film, not just like a train of thought, like a stream of consciousness, it expands. And then it expands too much, and I got to bring it back.
Right.
But that's where it hasn't changed. Where it has changed is, I think, over the years is I've written more scripts. I've just been more conscious about structure and you know, just things that work and don't work. More tools in my toolbox that I didn't have before, which sometimes is also a bummer though, because once you get to know more, it helps you make better films, better structured films. But sometimes it takes away the magic of like, I'm just doing this because I think it feels right. Yeah, so it's analytic versus intuitive. Yeah.
Well, there's a freedom in not knowing the rules versus knowing the rules.
That's why, you know, they always say like poker players, when they first start playing, they tend to win.
Right.
You know, because they
They
go
have
with
no
the
idea
gut.
what they're doing.
Yeah.
You can't read them.
Yeah.
Like, whereas, like, sometimes a filmmaker who's been working for an extended period of time, you they start to feel like they have to channel things to the audience,
Yeah.
and the audience can start reading their hand a little bit more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fortunately, people can't read your hand yet.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing in the context of the conversation we were just having.
I know.
But the film, how can people see Miss Purple?
So it opens today at the Quad in New York. It's playing at the Landmark in Westwood in Los Angeles. And it expands next week to a bunch of like Boston and San Francisco. So it's going to be in most major cities. And it'll continue to expand for the next 2 months. So please share on social media, Facebook, Twitter. Check it out if you like it. Tell your friends. And this type of movie is really, the word of mouth is really important. So if it's something that you enjoy, please share.
Congratulations, Justin. Everybody give Justin a round of applause for being here. Let's hear it.